Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to kick off this roundtable dedicated to finance and defense issues with you. I'm Damien Concé, CEO of Almas, but today I will be a part of this event as a member of the Alumni Association of the French Institute of Advanced Studies in National Defense, 3AED, who has organized this event with COGERS. As you may know, some months ago in Europe, sustainable finance was reluctant to invest in defense industries. The European Green Taxonomy was pretty unfriendly to this economical field that complies with ESG criteria. In addition, most of small business, medium-sized companies, and mid-caps were complaining against banks and other financial institutions, highlighting their misunderstanding of the defense economical field and their global unwillingness. Then the Ukrainian wake-up call rang. Nevertheless, the current situation of this company will not change in a snap of a finger. To discuss and learn more about those points, let me introduce you to my fellow panelists. Lisa Antoine, who joined the European Commission in December 2020 as the seconded national expert within DG Defense Unit A, responsible for defense industry, in which she is in charge of several transversal files, such as implementation of the European regulation for the screening of foreign investments for defense, or the access to finance for the defense industry. And Paul Boniou, CEO and founder of L'Arguilière Finance, a corporate bank specializing in small and mid-cap transactions with offices in France, Switzerland, and Belgium. With Paul, we will discuss what are exactly the small cap needs and if the market met those expectations. And with Lisa, we will see how EU may be part of the solution. Then together, we will look for the missing piece of the project. So Paul, please tell us more about L'Arguilière Finance and the need of the small caps and in the specific sector of defense, or at least in dual technologies. La deuxième, je fais la tienne.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello. I'm very happy to share experience with you in relation with our topic, and I will speak more about finance. As a financial expert and investment banker localized mainly on the French market, I would like to share my experience and my point of view. The subject for me is to point out the problems faced by most of the companies working in the defense and security sector. I will talk about problems in terms of financing operations and transmission of companies. The goal is to give you a very quick 360 degrees testimonial. First, in France, we have a specific organization of the DIB. We have, just to start larger, 4,000 companies, and mainly 2,000 companies dedicated to armies and securities. On the top of that, you have 8 companies that you know quite well: Airbus, Arcus, Dassault, MBDA, Naval Group, Nexter, Safran, and Thales. And their weight in the specific sector is 80% in terms of turnover and 84% of the exports. These are the main companies. We will not talk about these companies because it's easy for them to find finance and to export and to organize. It's a quite easy organization for them. You have small and medium sized companies. Most of the companies which are small. They represent only 2% of the exports. But to be honest, from the point of view of the bankers and from the investors, it's a very complex sector. Just in a few words, it's a complex industry because you have many kind of different uses and products and services to the armed forces and to security. It's very different to provide services to the armed force and to sell prohibited weapons. You have economical and social impacts having companies located in France. You have an impact on employees, on employment in regions, and you have impact of wealth in regions as well. And the last concern is sovereignty. And as you know, for bankers or investors, sovereignty is not the most important point of view and the driver to invest or driver to give money. The sector is complex, but which is more complex is about all the extra financial aspects of this industry, as you know. For example, you have the Sapin 2 law against corruption. It's very laudable and it's essential to have that in the French law and even in Europe. But to be honest, it's quite complex for some French companies to play the same rules compared to companies that have not this law on the exports fields. It's not an easy competition in that case. You have subject in the hands of compliance departments and banks and funds. And you know, compliance services are more and more powerful in banks. And right now it's quite complex to go against the culture of prudence. And if you are talking about sovereignty, it's complex to mix with prudence. You have the ITA aspects that you know quite well, but it's not very simple for a banker or for an investor to understand this specific point, because if you are an investor and if you are looking to invest to a company which is exporting, it's not so easy to how could I say, have a clear view on this, on the consequences of the ITA aspects. You have the European taxonomy, which is moving quite fast these last few weeks, but it's a real problem, and we'll talk about taxonomy, I think, with Lisa. And you have as well a problem with the NGOs and ESG concerns. It's quite complex right now for bankers and investors to move ahead the reputation problems. For example, you have new NGOs which are taking the measure of the part of the turnover made with the army and with military products, and it gives a bad measure to NGOs and to investors. In this specific sector, you know as well that public authorities have is a key aspect, because you have the importance of the state as a shareholder of the companies. For example, CIE in France or ONERA, which are research institutions, and the state is owner of 11% of Airbus, 18% of Safran, 35% of Thales, 62% of the rights of Naval Group. Then you have a main influence of the state on this specific sector, and it's quite complex for investors to have state so present in this activity. As well, you have mainly one client, considering the French market, which are the armed forces, and it's very complex to depend mainly to one client because dependence is hard. Oui. Last point, you have it's a square scroll for public equity funds, because you have equity funds are investing for 5 to 7 years, which is quite different for the company in the DIB. You have less competitive exits. You know about Photonis, for example, which has been sold to French private equity funds, HLD, but at a lower price than what the price was expected with by Ardian, the shareholder previously. And the last point is that depending on public orders is a very bad message for investors. What are the different types of needs which the companies are facing in this specific industry? First, the balance sheet needs very high financing amounts. Loans and bonds following the evolution of taxes is an important point to see. You need to have a stability of the shareholders' base, and you need to reach, the goal is to reach European critical size with export and potential shareholders. You have the problem of changing generation of the companies and of managers. And you have, for most of the companies involved in the industry, companies have to go to industry 3.0 or 4.0. And most of the company and most of the sectors outside of these specific sectors are facing consolidation. We have seen the problems. Now, just let's see what exists for the DIB companies specifically in France. First of all, you have the DGA, which is doing a very good job, and it's a key actor, as you know. You have some public financing, but we'll talk later about that. They are not so present. And you have the banks, which are helping mostly the big 8 groups. And unfortunately, it's very complex for some companies even to open a bank account. In some cases, if you say that you are working for military products, defense products, you may not have your bank account opened. And talking about investment funds, as you know, for the last 20-25 years, private equity funds have been very central and very useful to finance the development of companies. They are investing for LBOs. They are investing for the sale of companies, for managers, but traditionally in France, in all the sectors, you have nearly 300 management companies dedicated to private funds. If we are talking about defense, you have only 3 or 4 private equity funds. We have seen that, as I told previously, with Photonis. What is interesting is to compare what you have in France, which is very poor in terms of finance, to other countries. If you look to the US country, to the USA, you have many equity funds. You have Qtel. You have even a new fund that has been launched recently, which is the first fund for cyber, launched by military veterans, and they have huge amounts. At the same time, we have a state federal state support in the US, like DARPA. As you know, DARPA has financed GPS. They have financed most of the SpaceX first steps. In China, you have major investments driven by the state as well. For example, 18 months ago, the Chinese government announced that they will finance 100 billion US dollar for the next 5 years, only dedicated to cyber, artificial intelligence, and quantum. At the same time, Europe said that for the next 5 years, they will invest 1 billion US dollar, or 1 billion euro, which is not so different right now. And you have some states like Turkey, which are deeply involved to finance their DIB industry and actors. Then the main point is to ask about new sources of financing. As we have seen, we have a very specific industry. We have barriers which are quite high. You have problems of reputation. Then you have only very few actors acting and investing and sending money to the DIB companies. Nevertheless, it's a very interesting sector. For example, these few points. You have a higher profitability in companies acting in the defense sector. You have a very strong market, and it's a very resilient industry and activity. It's counter-cyclical, which is interesting for investment funds and bankers, not to invest only in tech or cyber or services, or it's very important to have in their portfolio counter-cyclical activities. And nowadays you have specific factors, mainly for the last years and now for the last months, with tension between the US and China, mainly around Taiwan, but not only. As you know, task fields are very large in the space or under the seas. You have the terrorist risk in Sahel, which is endemic for years. And more recently, as you know, war in Ukraine has changed deeply the importance and the view on the sectors. And as you know, yesterday, the French President, Emmanuel Macron, petitioned Europe to support its own defense industry by new war economy. And when we talk about war economy, we have to talk about financing this economy and this industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for this presentation. After this complete analysis, let's continue with the top-down view. Lisa, since Thierry Breton states that Europe is no longer naive, are we living the dawn of a new age?
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, okay. Okay, thank you for this great overview, and I will not insist so much on the difficulties that company face, although we have also listened a lot of companies and we exchange a lot with both SMEs and large groups to identify funding needs and try to find solutions. I would like to first start giving you an overview of what we do at the Commission. First, explaining a bit what is the EDF, the European Defense Fund, and other activities, and then try to focus more on access to private finance, which should be our focus today. As you know, the Commission's actions in the field of defense come back to 2009, with a view to really work on transfer of procurement directives. But then it was like starting in 2016 that we really launched an action plan and tried to develop really new tools and financial tools to support directly the defense industry to really improve its competitiveness. And this is why we created this MIDG, DigiDefis, in 2020. Which has grown quite a lot in the last years to be able to implement the European Defense Fund. So this fund, the first calls were launched last year. We had two previous precursor programs, one for research PADR that you may know, and one EDIDP to test, let's say, financing tools in the area of research and development to be able to launch this European Defense Fund. So we have first batch of calls for proposal last year, and then we are launching new calls quite soon. And it's really new. I mean, this is the first time that the EU is really investing in defense, and it's really giving a strong signal to the market. And what is important to know is also that we have set up very strict eligibility rules to really give funding to EU companies and prevent also, let's say, transfer of technologies, etc. And this is something that has inspired also other programs like space or security programs that the Commission is financing. So let's say that we're establishing a really more strategic approach in financing programs, thanks to this. Yeah, this. Sorry, no, it's okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, no, paper. So, beyond this European Defense Fund that aims at supporting research capability, we have this part on acquisition that we had announced when launching the EDF, but we never really proposed concrete measures in that regard, and that's only recently that the Commission proposed to set up new tools to facilitate joint procurement by member states, so to be able to not only finance programs directly, but then to encourage member states to buy, let's say, what they support. So we are developing these instruments at the moment. It was announced, I mean, in the context of the Ukraine conflict. The member states asked us to really come up with solutions to really accelerate, not only to address immediate needs, but then medium terms and more long-term needs. Also to ensure that all the budgets that are announced by member states are going to acquisitions of capabilities that we develop in Europe, including with EU financing. So this is something we are working on. And I just wanted to mention also two priorities that we have is really to try to work with other sectors and try to first take into account defense need in other civilian programs that we launch at Commission level. And really try to launch new actions on innovations to, as you see at NATO level, at EDA level, everyone is launching its innovation scheme, and the Commission also announced that recently, and really trying to develop new tools to support really small companies, accompany them across the whole cycle, and we will finance that through the European Defense Fund mainly. And then develop also other financial tools including to attract private investors. And that's where I was coming to my second slides. Yes, okay, it's here. So now something that you may not know so much, because the European Defense Fund, when we talk about the Commission in the area of defense, we always refer to European Defense Fund, but then I would like to talk about InvestEU, which is a program which basically is an EU budget guarantee that the Commission uses to guarantee operations that are done at two levels, so either by the European Investment Bank or European Investment Fund, or by national promotional banks. Here, we identified clearly that there is a lack of fundings in the European defense sector, including in particular for SMEs. I will not detail that because Paul gave us a really good overview, but clearly we identified these needs and said, okay, this InvestEU program has to really be able to guarantee operation in the defense sector. So one of the strategic priorities is defense, clearly, and it's identified in the program. And then the idea is to have an EU budget guarantee to increase the capacity of bearing capacity of financial entities, so EIB, EAF, or other banks, for different kinds of operations. So it can be for loans or guarantee to access loans or equity financing. So we are selecting quite a number of national banks that to implement that. So they can propose funding instruments that are generalist but include defense, but also it can be really targeting defense. And we really try to promote that, saying, okay, we know that it's also risky for you to invest in that sector, so this is why we have this EU guarantee. And at the moment, our focus is really on equity financing, and we're working a lot with the European Investment Fund that launched already some calls for proposal to select some fund managers. And we really, first I would like to come back a bit on how the European Investment Fund works. To be a bit more precise, European Investment Fund works indirectly, so we guarantee the operation that some financial intermediaries will be doing, and they are selected by the European Investment Fund, so it can be as banks or other types of investors. And we give them guidelines on how they have to invest, but the Commission is not really saying where they should invest exactly. We're giving guidelines, and then we select some fund managers that will invest in a specific sector. So we really try to improve this access to finance, to equity finance for defense through European Investment Bank. And we recently proposed to use money from the European Defense Fund to give even more incentive to the European Investment Fund to go to that sector. I will not detail too much that because it's still under discussion, but just for you to know that we might have soon even more money to support funds that are really willing to go in that sector. So it's also a call for, if you're investors or be ready to, if you're interested, you can apply directly on the EAF website and to benefit from this guarantee. And the EAF generally invests 1/3 of the amount of the fund, or it can be up to 50% in certain cases, depending on the strategy. So this is for us a tool to improve access to equity financing, because of course, as Paul said earlier, we see that there are many private equity and venture capital funds outside of the EU, but in EU, those that are ready to support the sector, we don't see so many. So, this is a way for us to really try to encourage and build that community. I hope so. I will stop 1 second. I think I can, Yes, this was, I will not be too detailed, but just on the French banks, I know that some banks, for example, in France, we have BPI France, or in other countries, some have really developed schemes to support the defense sector, and this can be instruments that potentially could benefit also from our support. So this is what we are trying to do to support, and so to have a support. Those two kind of support are complementary, because in the end it will, support like we can do through national banks and through private funds, in the end can both invest in some companies together and then be complementary and contribute to support these companies. Now this was for the end. I will talk about quickly about the EDF to give you some info and send you to our stand, because we have for the first time a stand in a defense fair. So this is something I would like also to give you info about. Yes, I can stop here and then we can keep discussing.
So maybe. So we had a bottom-up analysis and then a top-down one. But at the end of the day, after your presentation, I feel like there is still a missing part between the connection between the EU and what could be the SMEs needs. So in your view, and what would be the specific profile for a financial vehicle able to collect the EU financing and funding, as well as raising private funds and to invest in different SMEs? Paul, maybe?
There are many things to say, but to be short, you have all over the world many investment funds dedicated to own industries facing specific problems in many sectors. What we observe is that industry defense has been facing many problems for the reason we have seen, but if we have, thanks to InvestEU, for example, a positive signal to the market, for example, with the aspects of reputation, the end of including defense industry in the European taxonomy, if you have much more money, and if countries or EU are acting as co-investors, in this case, it will give lower risk to investors. Defense would be an industry or a sector like many others.
Yes, but regarding the SME's point of view, their need is quite different than a general kind of SMEs. First, you need the stability of your shareholders. Then you need to be helped to go to a European level, and you have to get a specific support. Do you think that this kind of needs is taken into account by the actual investment funds? Don't you think there is an issue regarding the business model of the investing funds on the ground of the rotation of their assets? And
you have a very good team in France, which is Chef d'économie de défense à l'IHEDN, and they are issuing very good studies about economics and data for this industry. If you compare specific companies in our sector, you see that investment delays are longer. You see that it's more profitable. You have more research and development and more investments, but it's a very good industry for investors. That are the good points. The bad points, you were talking about stability of the shareholders. I'm not sure I do totally agree with that. I would prefer to say shareholders, and shareholders are break. The main problem is not stability, it's a question of sovereignty. For example, I will talk again of this example of Photonis, HLD, private equity funds not depending to banks, not collecting money from traditional asset managers, totally frightened by the GNO and reputation problems, but more dedicated to quality of investment, doing the job as an investor, and doing profit on a long-term view. Then HLD invested in Photonis. And in fact, they did it was a bargain for them. It was a good opportunity because they bought 370 million euros compared to the sale price, which was 520 million euros, which was the price with the US buyer, but which was not in the sovereignty area.
But there will be an exit strategy issue.
Yes,
at the end of the day.
yes, it's a question of number of funds because the stability of shareholders versus sovereignty. If you have many funds having a sovereign ability to share the point of view and to give stability, it's good. But you can potentially change your shareholders every 5 to 7 years.
Yes, but
Like in real life.
yeah, this will also depend on the taxonomy, and this is a direct link to your presentation. We saw that the EU started to create new tools. However, in the same way, there were some projects such as the green taxonomy and the social taxonomy. Can you tell us a little bit more of how to handle those different issues in the same direction?
Yes, how to start on that. Now, the EU is really trying to give to establish a framework, because now let's say that when you define your ESG policy, you can take any reference that you want. So I mean, the idea is to define exactly on which criteria the companies and investor will really assess what is ESG compliant or not. This is all about disclosure requirements and due diligence, etc. When it comes to taxonomy, I mean, the taxonomy is really to identify what is green activity, and it concerns really a small part of the economy, and that's what we see. Everyone is talking about taxonomy, but this is really a niche, let's say. We will include more and more activities. So we exchange actually with industry to say, okay, do you express the need to include some defense activities as part of this niche of super green activities? And this could be a possibility. Until now, this has not been done because we decided at EU level to really focus on some really priority area, but we can also include some others in this taxonomy. But this is not the only way to show that the company is making efforts, and this is really, for me, a niche. But clearly, I mean, we will have a new call to select a new, platform to define the activity, etc. And this is open. There is not a will in that taxonomy to exclude defense. Well, then we come to this social taxonomy. At the moment, there was a proposal to have some exclusion criteria, but clearly the final result was that what is excluded is what is considered as controversial weapons, which is normal, and to give, let's say, a definition that could be also applied by all the financial sector. And what would be good is to have a similar reference that the financial sector could use. But at this stage, on the social aspects, there is not a will to go beyond at this stage. It's so already complex to have an environmental taxonomy. But we are very careful about that, of course, because this is going to have a significant influence on how the investors see a company, and then and will be willing to invest. Yeah.
Paul, you wanted to add something?
Taxonomy. It's a rude word for investors and bankers. Why? Because I do agree with what you say, but to be honest, when you are talking to investors, when you are talking to management teams in the private equity funds, they all say that they are totally frightened by the reputation and the potential risk. And they do put defense in the European taxonomy. And even if you, 6 months ago, Banque de France had a point of view saying that they will cross and accept the European taxonomy about defense. And it was a very bad message to the financial industry in France, and as most of the bankers and most of the investors are looking to that. Most of the funds in the private equity funds are coming from pension funds, insurance companies, banks, and from and let's call them institutionals. Institutionals are not taking risk. They are only thinking about prudence and reputation. They don't want to be involved in 5 years, 10 years, because they made a wrong investment or because they let do a wrong investment 5 or 10 years previously. Then the message is not clear, and to have a strong message and to finance the war industry, now I think that Europe has to to give us a clear, very clear speech.
Yeah.
I think that the message were clear and loud and clear. However, in my view,
I'm very happy because I'm talking to someone from the European Commission, and it's important.
but
in
my view, the missing part is from the civil sectors, because maybe my understanding is that now Europe is committed to deliver funds to this sector. So what we need is to create some specific financial vehicle that can take those funds and deliver them to the SMEs and also defense companies. And the problem is the ecosystem. You talk already of the American ecosystem, which is much more important than in Europe. We here in France we have less than 5 dedicated investment fund on defense. In the US it's not the same scale. So the work is to be done by the private sector, in my view. But maybe it's time to include the audience in our meeting, and if you have some question or comments, please raise your hand and we'll send the microphone.
Yes, I'm running a product development center in Finland, and this is an excellent topic because we do optics and precision engineering, and as I'm running within the university R&D center, we have to invest all equipment under the topic of photonics. But when I look at our customer portfolio, I see that out of our 50 customers, half of them are also working on the defense sector. So there's this kind of strange situation that we are working on photonics, but basically we have quite often cases that we are actually developing something for the defense sector. And if we are able to come up with a new process using advanced equipment and such, it means that also the SMEs need to invest into same kind of equipment that the university already has and build the same capabilities. So there has never been, at least in Finland, this consensus of how to fund when you're in between photonics and in between a defense. And I'm happy that there is actual movement now to at European level funding also to this sector, that there is this kind of gray area that you're working on both sides at the same time, and the defense sector is definitely lacking the investment funding that we need. It's tricky.
It's tricky.
Thank you to the organization for this break. It allows us to have some break during our speech. I haven't heard any question, but I would say that duality is very important, and it gives some complexity above everything.
In addition, maybe there is a question of TRL. It's depend of how far you are from the industrial part of your business, because it's not the same kind of funding you can obtain either from your national state or from the EU. But the good notice is that there will be a solution in the next year.
No, clearly, and also, I mean, the European Defence Fund is really focused on defence application, but we'll try to also cooperate more and more with those in charge of Horizon Europe, and that finance also these solutions for more civilian applications, and to also do some follow-ups and some of the capabilities that we finance through EDF, of course, are also dual use. And I was mentioning the European Investment Bank and EAF. Clearly, these banks have some limitations on core defense investments. So, I mean, this is also the kind of activities that they will be willing to focus on. Because, unfortunately, I mean, European Investment Bank and fund, have still potentially a possibility to evolve on that, but it's not up to the Commission. We've been calling European Investment Bank to do so, but it's up to member states. So this is.
Hi, thank you so much for such an enlightening speech. 2 questions. The first question is to the EU. When it takes a year from application to discussion of contracts for the European Defence Fund, is it really an innovation fund, or is it actually a future fund? Because, for instance, if you were in that process, you would have missed an innovation that would have been successfully used in Ukraine. War is the biggest generator of innovation, and I say that as a former colonel who's now a founder of a defence startup, Single Use. And my second question is currently I'm having negotiations with both the Saudi government and the Emirati governments, who are potential users of our, they're 99% guaranteed to use our innovation. Is there another route for me within Europe when we have now the Ukraine war, and whilst the Emiratis and Saudis would use our kit, the Ukrainians would also? Is there a way where we can find a solution which is not seed or angel funding, but not huge scale, so in that sweet spot of seed, 1.5 to 3 million, easily? That's my question. Thank you.
First of all, it's public funding. So public funding is longer than private one. should be one element of your answer.
No, but it's clear. It's the process is the same than for other EU grants, and it's quite long. But we also have for certain calls that it's smaller amounts, but it's more like for SMEs and that want to develop some very innovative solution. We have quicker processes. I cannot give you so much detail. I would have to see with my colleagues that I understand. That know it more, but there is some procedures that are shorter, but we're still in the process. These are grants, and it's quite long. But for very quick investments, it will have to be more in financial tools that we saw before.
The fast track would be for seed, I guess, much more than for industrialization. So you may comply the obligation, but we will check.
No, clearly they may have opportunities in these calls that with like fast track, and then possibly with some funds or banks that then for the really quicker solutions. But for the grants, I cannot shorten it too much.
And I understand that you are talking about private fundings to develop your company. It's not so easy because there are small amounts between seed and pre-A series, and it's not so easy to find these amounts because it's.
But the due diligence will be the same. So this is a point. You need less money, but the work for a banker or for an investor is the same. So this is the issue also.
But it's the same if you do any kind of services or in any industry. It's quite difficult. And if you are doing export, it's more complex because it's complex for investors to look at what you do. It is far from what they are when they can manage and study. But we hope that EU Invest will assist companies to raise funds.
Hello, thank you very much for this presentation. I come from Estonia, and as a small country, at the same time, we're pretty good when it comes to startups. So from private sector, Skype-wise, Bolt, and so on. So the VC industry is pretty mature in this sense, but when it comes to defense, of course, most of these funds say no because they do not have a mandate from their LPs. So I understand it's a common issue, and that's why the European money and the NATO, the ANA program are very much welcome. So one question is, are you looking at what NATO is doing at the same time with their financing, and is it like complementary? And the second question for now European funding, I saw that private equity firms and VCs are also included. So will there be like public tenders which VCs get to manage, these funds? So these two questions. And as a side note, I'm a private investor in 2 defense companies myself. And if any of you have interest to get access to Estonian ecosystem, I'm happy to share my business card later.
Thank you very much. I will have a first official answer. We invite a representative of the NATO fund, but he was not able to join us. However, it's working like in different lines. So in my understanding of what will do the NATO funds is that they are connected to the JANA and their incubator, and so it will be. It's like when you raise fund, you may be in contact with different investing funds, and they can share the ticket, work together. It most likely will be the same. For the rest, I will leave you answer.
Yes, for the selection of the funds. So if we talk about the European Investment Fund, they publish a call for proposal. It's already online. They say you can just go on the website. They can give you more information afterwards. And apply, and then they regularly select some fund managers, and then as I said, they invest in these funds up to generally 25-30%, or up to 50, and yes, they're regularly selecting these funds so that we receive the EU investments. And with regards NATO, we are discussing with NATO, and it's clearly complementary, because in the end it will encourage more private equity, venture capitalists, to the defense sector on that side, and the same for us. And in the end, it can benefit for the same companies, and that can receive both fundings. I mean, we still have to see how we will articulate all that, but clearly it's complementary. And
Do you ever see international companies coming together, smaller companies, as another vehicle or option to find the funding? Because in the U.S., we're finding that this is a great topic, because we're facing the same issue of being a smaller company, trying to find that investor who wants to invest in it's a very shaky topic, especially with everything going on with guns in America. We have this situation where we're trying to find that right relationship. So could that relationship look more of as an international relationship versus just a local relationship?
I'm not sure to have a clear answer on that. If I understand well, there is a problem of sovereignty. Even inside Europe, it's not so simple. When you see the SCAF program, for example, it's not so clear, and even domestic countries inside the same area don't find easily a solution, not to compete and to go to to achieve their global goal. After that, you may have, for small companies, GVs, but you have this barrier of sovereignty as well. And after, you may have corporate investment, which is different from the investment from private equity firms. and the corporate investment is not so different because of the sovereignty aspects. I'm sorry if my answer is not clear, but...
Any other question? Sorry.
So is there a clear definition of controversial weapons regarding your comment on what can be financed and what cannot be financed?
The international treaties, that's
Yes.
what is. That's the one.
But there's no EU official definitions. We have different texts where you found definitions. There is one, the more official, I would say, is the directive which is called SFRD that applies to sustainable financial products, where you have a definition of these controversial weapons, and you have 4 types of international treaties that are mentioned. And you have more extensive definitions, but they are not like official definitions. The one that was proposed in this report on social taxonomy is just a report. It's not an official definition, but it refers, let's say, to the whole list of weapons prohibited by international conventions.
Yeah.
Well, you have some that are not signed by all EU member states, so this is the issue for the EU because you have some conventions. Okay, but
it is our time is now over. To wrap up, I would like to quote Hölderlin: "Where there is danger, there is also salvation." Thank you very much for attending, and enjoy your staying at the fair.